Hello, hey Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, ma'am. We were having some trouble with the Zoom link, but we got it figured out.
Awesome.
So thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm
Hmm.
gonna do a quick intro and then I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Let's do it.
Everybody, please welcome Matt Beaudreau. He's a nationally recognized keynote speaker, educator, and a founder of Apogi Strong, the Human and Family Systems Institute. Over the past 2 decades, Matt has built systems that develop self-leadership in both organizations and families, working with over 1,000 school communities and mentoring more than 1,000 families. His work has reached over 250,000 people and has been trusted by organizations including Lockheed Martin, Caterpillar, American Eagle, and the United States Air Force. Matt, over to you. And everybody, this will be a wonderful session.
Oh, I can't wait. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad everybody got to be here. Happy Friday. Happy May 1st. And I'm going to start with just a basic fact here. Your organization has an invisible operating system. And I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like. And I'm going to take about 30 seconds to do that. And I don't know if anybody knows how elephants get trained, but baby elephants get tied to a post. They can't, they quite literally can't break free. And they learn that the rope always wins. Now, by the time that elephant is full grown, it's big enough to completely, uproot the entire post without even trying. But it doesn't because it stopped trying years ago. The elephant grows, the belief doesn't grow. And right there is the invisible operating system that is running your organization. Your best people, the ones you hire because they're really sharp, because they're driven, because they're full of initiative, they're sitting on capabilities that they stopped believing they could use. And it's not because they can't, it's because at some point the rope wins and they quit pulling. So here's the part that's hard to sit with. Most of the time, we are the ones as leaders who put the rope there, even when we know we're putting it there. And you guys, I've done it to myself. Case in point, a few weeks ago, I was on a call with a very large organization, and they want me to speak on earned autonomy. So self leadership, high standards, building teams that don't need to be managed into doing good work. The director has seen what I do. He's bought in. In fact, he brought me into two of his previous companies to help implement what they wanted me to implement there. But HR gets on the call and says, "Hey, before we book you, do you mind sending us your speech outline for approval? We have to make sure it aligns with our values." They want to talk on earned autonomy, but they wouldn't extend autonomy to the person they're hiring to bring that to their organization, right? And that's the entire crisis of modern leadership kind of playing out in real time on this single phone call. And here's the thing, what I caught myself doing in that very moment is I felt the reflex to just comply, right? And I've been self-employed for more than a decade, no boss, no approval chain, but I still feel the rope myself. That's how deep this can go for everybody. Guys, here's the good news. We're living through the most significant workforce disruption in a century. That's actually really good news. AI can automate tasks. It can generate reports. It can synthesize data. It can draft proposals. It can run analyses at scale. All these amazing things. What it can't truly do is lead. It can't earn trust. It's not going to hold a standard when emotions are like, oh, you got to crumble, but your character is like, no, you got to press on, right? It can't make a covenant and keep it. So the organizations that are going to thrive over the next 10 years aren't going to be the ones that deploy AI the fastest. They're going to be the ones that develop the humanity behind the human leaders who know how to use it. That's what we're building today. And I'm going to give you two quick pictures that I want you to hold in your mind until the very end of my talk here. So it's a picture of two birds. So D.H. Lawrence wrote my favorite poem of all time. And he says, I never saw a wild thing sorry for itself. A small bird will drop frozen dead from a bough without ever having felt sorry for itself. That's the wild bird, the tough bird, the resilient bird, the free bird, right? I'm going to die on my own terms, right? That's bird number one. So I want you to picture that. And then Alejandro Jodorowsky said, birds born in a cage think flying is an illness. That's the caged bird, safe, managed, convinced that freedom is pretty dangerous. That's bird number two. And I want you to think which one is most like you at work right now. And I want you to hold the thought. Don't answer it yet, but I want you to hold the thought because we're going to come back to that. Because I've spent 20 years trying to answer that question for myself, for the organizations that I get to work with, and for the families I mentor. Like they mentioned, I've built over 100 school communities just in these last couple of years. I've gotten to mentor, over 1,000 of families. Lockheed Martin, Caterpillar, U.S. Air Force, Cedar Sinai, a couple TEDx talks. I've gotten to do this work, but most importantly, what I've gotten to do is recognize the patterns. I've gotten to see what works. And I've gotten to see how difficult it can be for some people and some organizations to ultimately untie the rope and to leave it untied. So here's what I'm going to promise you in the next 24 minutes. Most organizations are oscillating between two broken models. So you've got micromanagement, killing initiatives, or chaos, killing standards. So I'm going to offer you the third path. 3 steps to that third path. They're all C's that create more C's, makes it easy to remember. So you get a catalyst moment that creates clarity, you get creation that earns confidence, and you get a covenant that guarantees commitment. That's what we're going to roll through, and we're going to do it quickly. So grab your notepad, let's build. Step one is going to be a catalyst to clarity. So before I tell you the story, I want you to think back to the version of yourself that you imagined that you would grow up to be when you were younger, right? And the one that was going to do something that really mattered, to lead something worth leading, to build something worth building. And I want you to think and just really consider, is there a gap between that person and where you are today? And I hope that there is no gap. I hope if there is, it's a small one. Maybe it's, non-existent altogether. But in my experience, that gap exists for most men and women to some extent. And I'm not asking you to think about that to feel bad by any stretch of the imagination. I'm asking because that gap, whatever size it is, it has a name. And until you name it, it owns you. The catalyst moment we're going to talk about allows you to name it so that you can move forward. That's why it's the first step. Here's what it looked like for me. So, quick flashback to about 11 years ago. I'm sitting in my car after work, engines off, hands are up on the wheel, kind of staring at nothing. It's the moment when you're sitting in the parking lot longer than you should because going inside means like, this is just my life now kind of thing, right? But I look down and I start reading this PDF, and I'm reading a PDF that I may or may not have printed off of company paper, company ink. But it's a manifesto by a guy named Seth Godin, who became a mentor of mine, and it's called Stop Stealing Dreams. Within pages, I felt two things simultaneously. I felt gratitude, and I felt a little bit of anger at myself. I felt gratitude because I finally saw clearly what was happening in my own life. And I felt a little bit of anger because I realized I'd seen the pattern for a long time and I just kept playing along. At that point, I was an administrator in a private school in California, and I was sitting in the car that day and I got clarity. I didn't get inspiration, I got clarity that I was complicit in something that at that point I no longer really jived with. I was working in a system that I saw was developed in the 1800s to prepare kids for factory work, right? Bells and rows and standardized tests. And I just went, man, I'm preparing kids for a world that doesn't exist anymore, or for jobs that, have disappeared, and I'm calling it education. And the part that really broke me was that everybody on my campus knew, every teacher in our building knew that the system was broken. We were talking about it in the parking lots. We were talking about it at, conferences. We all knew. And then Monday morning would come and we'd ring the bell and we'd start all over. And I remember a mom named Cindy pulling me into a conference one day. And she says, "Hey, do you think this system is working for my son?" And I want you to feel this moment because Cindy drove to school that day. She sat down across from me. She was asking me, somebody she trusted, right, to be honest with her about her child's future. And in my head, I said, no, we're crushing Cameron's natural curiosity. We're calling it education. That's what I said in my head. What I said out loud to her was, well, every system has its challenges. And I watched the hope just die, in her eyes, kind of quietly. It's the way hope dies when somebody you trust doesn't tell you the truth, and you really hope they would. That's what I did, right? I gave her corporate speak in this elementary school. And so I drove home that night and I had to sit with that because I knew something that she didn't know yet, that I was just going to show up the next day and I was going to do it all again. And I was going to do it the day after that. Right. And none of us become mediocre and tie this rope overnight. We negotiate our way there. And at some point, I had to stop being angry at a system and I had to admit something that I was choosing it. Like I was choosing the rope. Sovereignty starts to begin as soon as you end the blame, right? I wasn't stuck anywhere. I was choosing to stay there. So it's that shift in our mindset from victim to builder. That's where sovereignty starts. That's where the catalyst really starts to fire something up. So I decided to test the waters by making just one small brave decision. I built this Shark Tank style project for the kids, for the students. Real boundaries, real metrics, real autonomy inside structure, far more autonomy than 12 and 13-year-olds had ever seen at school. But they had to pitch real products, they had to develop things, they had to deliver, they had to own the results. You guys, the 12 and 13-year-olds built the most amazing things you have ever seen. That project still runs at this school to this day, but that was my catalyst moment. And the clarity it gave me was this: gosh, people don't even necessarily need to be fully managed into doing good work. They just need a structure and a reason to make ownership possible. So, your action step today, your first one, is think about the conversation you've been avoiding. Think about the standard that you've been tolerating. Think about the version of yourself that you've started to negotiate away. Where are you still putting that rope out there? And I want you to name it. I just want you to name it out loud. Maybe say it to one person before the conference is over. Because once you have that catalyst moment to create the clarity for you, then you get to move on to step two, which is creation. Because it's creation that is going to earn confidence. So the Shark Tank moment, right? Like that changed everything for me. Now, I actually ended up quitting my job after that year. I had visions at that point of creating my own school. Big, irreversible decision, right? And you wake up the next morning after that big, irreversible decision. I quit, in the moment. I got that Jerry Maguire moment. And I'm thinking everything's all good. And I wake up the next morning and big stretch. And I'm like, oh, what have I done? Like, I panicked. I had a wife. I had a mortgage. I had three kids. I had a newborn son. So I did what any first time entrepreneur does, and I just panicked. And I Googled, right? Like, how do you start a school? Google has no idea how to start a school. And so the thing that people don't like to recognize about sometimes making that first brave decision is that the bravery itself, it lasts about like 24 hours. And then the old version of you starts to show up. It's quiet, sounds reasonable, starts making a semi-convincing case for why things were okay before, right? It wasn't that bad. At least it was stable. Who do you think you are doing this, right? It's a voice of familiarity that pretends to be truth. Guys, that voice isn't wisdom. That voice is the rope. And the only answer to that voice, it's actually not confidence, because you can't have confidence yet. The answer is creation. You don't get to decide your way into confidence. You can decide your way into cockiness, but that is going to break as soon as pressure comes along, right? The law of confidence is that it demands proof. You've got to create something first, and then confidence follows. Confidence is it's what's called a trailing indicator. So it shows up after the evidence, not before. Case in point, in my early 20s, just fun fact, I submitted a tryout for a guy named Ken Shamrock's legendary mixed martial arts fight team. This was like cage fighting before the UFC really took off, kind of thing. He called me a week later and he's like, "Hey, I want you to fight. I want you to fight the night before the tryouts. I want you to actually fight on this card." I said, well, I've never actually done this before, like in competition." He's like, "I know, that's the point." He didn't want to know if I believed I could fight. He wanted to see if I would actually do it. So I cut the weight. I showed up. I got my nose broken in the very first round. I ended up submitting the guy in the second. Showing up, though, win or lose, is what gave me the confidence to go into the tryout the next day. Confidence is accumulated evidence. It's not a personality trait, right, that you can just adopt. So the good news is proof doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist. Albert Camus has one of my favorite quotes of all time. He says, There's always a philosophy for a lack of courage. Nobody tells the stories about the flawless launch, right? You tell the stories about the duct tape and the pivot at midnight and the thing that almost collapses but doesn't. The creation process just needs to begin. So like when I started building my school campuses, I had this beautiful vision. Kids are going to be free, they're going to be self-directed, they're going to be empowered. No rigid structure, and it lasted for about 3 days. Day three, you got a kid that's building a fort out of everybody else's lunch boxes, and he's declaring it a sovereign nation. You got another kid running a protection racket for snacks. A parent pokes her head in and she's like, "Is this Montessori?" And I'm like, "No, Susan, your kid just invented a currency out of Pokemon cards. Like, we need some structure." But the principle that comes out of that chaos that I learned was that the clearer the standard, the more autonomy people can handle. I got brought back to that same Shark Tank moment with the 12 and 13-year-olds. The fuzzier the standard, the more chaos you get. And that's where I started to develop what I call the earn loop, EARN. The earn loop, which is now what I've implemented across the board in a lot of organizations. The E is expectations. You're making the standard explicit. Here's how you win. Here's how you lose. Super clear. A ends up being the accountability. People own their progress. They self-report. No surveillance needed. Ownership. The R is recognition. Progress gets seen and acknowledged. And the N is next level. Freedom expands as proof of competence appears. You guys, this is exactly where AI could fail us if we're not careful, and humans will win. AI can monitor. It can't hold you accountable to a standard that you chose. It can't recognize the difference between compliance and ownership. The earn loop is a human system because the thing it's building, which is sovereignty, is a human trait. So when I deploy that into our schools or into companies that I work with now, I've got complete confidence in its effectiveness because we have earned it. That never would have been developed if I hadn't started creating in the first place to get to figuring that out. I've actually also implemented it in my own home. Please listen to this. We're far from a perfect family. I am far from a perfect father. So I don't ever want to give the impression that I think anything otherwise. We're flawed like everybody else. However, it's been pretty cool to be able to tell people that my daughters, who are now 15 and 13, they bought their own horses when they were 9 and 7 with the money they made from the businesses that they owned. At 9 and 7, with their money, their businesses. Again, 15 and 13 now. My 15-year-old works full time. They've both written full novels. And I could go on, but you kind of get the point. My son, who's now 10, the other day we were at the grocery store and he was talking to the cashier like she was closing, or he was closing a business deal. And he walks around the corner and she goes, "Hey, before you leave, what on earth are you doing to raise a child like that?" And I wanted to say, well, I'm not really doing anything anymore. I've given them the tools to do these things themselves. Like, that's kind of the point. So I want you to be able to create a circumstance that demands that you or somebody else you work with, somebody else that you lead is able to show up and earn confidence. So here's your action step for step 2 of this process. I want you to pick one person, either on your team, maybe in your home, who's ready for more responsibility than you've given them. Define the standard, make it explicit, hand them the work, and get out of the way. That's the earn loop in motion. It's how sovereignty scales. I want you to create that scenario and see what kind of confidence can come out of that. Hey, bonus points for taking on that extra responsibility yourself. And then that ultimately leads us to step 3, which is a covenant so that you can guarantee commitment. You guys are going to have a great day today. You get to hear from all these amazing speakers. You have this amazing organization that's put on a wonderful event for you. You're going to have all these amazing conversations, right? You pick something to create, you're going to give some autonomy, and then life is going to come back as soon as Monday rolls around, right? And it comes back hard, and everything you committed to starts to feel optional again. That's the human condition, by the way. It's like, it's not weakness. That's the rope. And the only thing strong enough to hold against the rope is not going to be the buzzword of the day, right? Discipline or motivation or willpower. Because it's a covenant. A covenant is a non-negotiable agreement with reality. It's not what you say to yourself, your best version of yourself on your best day. It's the non-negotiable with reality. That includes your worst days, your most exhausted moments, the nights that you can't see straight. You guys, I've been married 17 years, together 20. Wedding vows sound amazing when everything is perfect, right? For better or for worse. Till death do us part. It's beautiful. And then my first daughter didn't sleep. Like, not just didn't sleep a little bit, like she routinely went over 24 hours without sleeping as an infant. She didn't sleep through the night until she was 2.5. And that's when we had our second daughter, who didn't sleep through the night until she was 18 months old. So that was 4 years, if you're doing the math, without sleeping a full night. I was so tired one night that I almost wrecked my car because I swerved to avoid hitting the giant cartoon baby I thought I saw in the middle of the road. Yeah. In those moments when you're terrified and you're exhausted and you're delirious, I promise you, commitment is not a feeling. You have to have a covenant. And that's when discipline becomes really kind of irrelevant, right? Because you're not making a decision anymore. The decision's already made. You're just living it. So a lot of people think, discipline's about willpower. I got to try harder. That's exhausting. It doesn't work. It runs out. If it becomes your identity because it's a covenant becomes your identity, then it's not even a question. Super quick example. I don't drink alcohol, never have. Not saying that's a pat on the back for me, just I never have. So people go, how do you stay disciplined around when other people are drinking? Don't you ever just want a beer? And I'm like, oh man, it doesn't even cross my mind. And it's not because I've got incredible willpower. I just have the identity of I'm not a drinker. Like, it's a covenant I have with myself. The identity is always stronger than willpower. It makes it so it's not even a question, right? My identity is a covenant that I have with myself on who I am and how I show up under any scenario. If you've ever seen the movie Pursuit of Happiness, I always love to mention this, right? Chris Gardner, Will Smith plays him in the movie, but homeless, sleeping in subway bathrooms with his 5-year-old son, unpaid internship at a brokerage, 6 months, no salary, 20 candidates, one job. And he wakes up every morning with nowhere to go home to, drops his son off at daycare, not knowing if we could pay for it, and he walks into his office knowing 20 people are competing for one position. And every single day, all he had was one standard that he tied his identity to. I will make more calls than everybody else. Non-negotiable. He didn't negotiate when he was exhausted. The standard was the standard. And at the end of the 6 months, he gets the job, right? Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, sorry, it's old. Not my fault that you haven't seen it, but now you can go watch it, right? One standard removes 100 negotiations. So right now, your job is to open your notes, grab a napkin, whatever's near you, grab whatever you got, write down a standard, not a goal, not an aspiration. One thing that you refuse to fall below starting today. And you probably already know what it should be. You probably already known for a while. And the thousands of people I've gotten to work with, that's usually the case. So I want you to commit today, not after the hard next week or when things settle down. Things don't settle down. Your life's happening to you right now. I want you to eliminate the exceptions. Okay. What I want to do is bring this home, and if there's any time at all for some Q&A, I know I want to try to leave it, but I got a couple minutes here that I want to bring this home. Before I do, I do have something for you. No catch on any of this. I just want to be able to send you a full breakdown of the earn loop, the framework that makes autonomy measurable and scalable in your organization. And I'm going to tie it into AI for you too, because I want you to understand how that works. So just send me an email if you want that. Subject line, you can just put the third path. I'll reply personally. Just give me until next week if you don't mind. And we'll make sure you have my email. You can just send it to matt@apogeestrong.com. But I'm not here to give you a handful of things and send you back on Monday. I want to shift something. So let's recap. And then I want to give you something to take away. So step one was catalyst moment creates clarity. Somewhere in your life, there's a misalignment. You know what it is. Name it. Accept responsibility for the choice you're making. Make one brave move and tell one person before the conference ends what that move's going to be. Step two, creation earns confidence, right? You don't wait to feel ready. You will never feel ready. You build proof for yourself and you give somebody the work that they're ready for as well. And I want you to let the evidence appear for both of you. Step three, the covenant is the only true commitment. It's the standard that you just wrote down. It's not a goal, it's a covenant. Don't negotiate with it. Don't give it a cheat day. Catalyst, creation, covenant leads you to clarity, confidence, commitment. That's the sovereign system, and I'm going to send it to you via email. But it all comes back around to those two birds we talked about at the very beginning. You got that wild bird, that tough bird, that resilient bird, that free bird that dies on its own terms, but it's freezing because it refuses structure. And you've got the caged bird, the safe bird, the managed bird, but it's convinced flying is an illness. I told you I'd make a case for which one we need to be going forward here in 2026, and it's neither. I want you guys to walk away from this conference being the birds that fly freely, but return every day to build its own intentional nest. Structure and soaring, standards and freedom, accountability and autonomy. Here's where AI fits into this picture, why it's so important to unpack the humanity before we even talk about AI today. Because the caged bird uses AI as another system to depend on, another authority to wait for instructions from, and another post to tie a rope around. The wild bird ignores AI entirely because they're convinced that their instincts are good enough and they don't have to deal with this, newfangled robot nonsense, right? The sovereign leader, that third path, the leader I want you all to be. That sovereign leader is intentional on how he or she deploys AI because they've already built the structure. They've got the clarity. They've earned the confidence. They've made a commitment, and AI can now become a multiplier rather than a replacement. AI in the hands of a sovereign leader is the most powerful combination we have in the modern workforce. That's not a threat by any stretch of the imagination. It's an opportunity. None of you need to choose between freedom and safety, or autonomy and accountability, or chaos or micromanagement. Sovereignty is that third path, the gap between who you are and who you know you're capable of being. That gap has a cost. It costs your organization, it costs people to lead, it costs you. Today, you have a system for closing that gap. And it is such an honor to be here and to get to fly with you. I can't wait to see you go build your nest.
Thank you, Matt. There's so many comments, loving this conversation, hearing you talk. Everybody's like on the YouTube stream. Everybody's like, wonderful, awesome. You've been great.
Good.
That's all the comments that are coming there.
Good. Good for you.
One quick question before I let you
Mhm.
go, right?
Mhm.
Just
Please.
because I was curious. We talked about the third path. It was wonderful to hear about that. Can that be implemented within an existing team, or do you think folks need to fundamentally shift how we hire and retain talent before we
It's
start doing it?
That is such a great question. The answer is very much both. And that is absolutely what I end up working on organizations with. We come in, we will do one or the other first, but it's almost always how do we create the existing structure within the team right now.
Okay.
So that large organization that I was talking about, but it's the HHS. So government
Mm-hmm.
organization, we're talking 5,000 people. So that's
Mm-hmm.
who I'm working with right now
Okay.
to recreate the structure in there so that they understand the structure first,
Right.
and then they can hire from that understanding.
Okay.
And then we take a look at how does each generation coming in view that structure, because depending on that worker and how they're coming in, they get implemented into that structure a little differently. The conversation's a little different. So yeah, I highly recommend implementing it in the organization first and then hiring from that standard. Really good question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. I hope you can stick around a little bit longer. There's a lot more sessions. There is a networking opportunity, but we thank you so much for being here today, Matt.
Honor is mine. Thank you guys. Go do some great
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you all.
All right, folks.